How are you?
Good.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Good morning. You'll be all right.
Yeah. Just put it in there.
Left it on.
That'll do it.
End up on
I know.
Oh, no. Thanks.
Morning.
Morning.
Hey, morning.
Good, how are you?
You get two tour?
There it is.
Probably the
Oh, I
same.
see it. I see.
Oh, you got it? Okay.
Mhm,
I
thanks.
think it's the same for all of us.
Mhm.
Oh, there it is. Oh, I got my trusty book.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. We're being a little late. Why don't we rise for the pledge of allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All board members are present for today's meeting. And we'll move to approve the minutes from the October 1st, 2021 board meeting. If there's a second. Second. Thank you. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I will move to acknowledge Secretary of State Memorandum and Directives, Memorandum 2021-03, regarding responsibilities of sheriffs and chiefs of police for this upcoming election, and Directive 2021-20, Advisory 2021-05, the unofficial and official canvasses of the November 2nd, 2020 general election. If there's a second. Second. Thank you, Mr. Mondolowski. Any questions or comments? Thank you. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And unfortunately, we'll have to move to acknowledge the deaths and resignation from appointed to elected offices. The passing of Judge Jones and Judge Russo, resignation from offices of Judge Jennifer Weiler and Annette Danzig, and the appointment, and the appointment to office of Amanda Kurland, Leslie Ann D'Souza, and John Kropinski. If there's a second. Second. Thank you. Any other question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And I will move to acknowledge the withdrawal of a candidate for the November 2nd, 2021 general election. That would be a member of council at large, and Ms. Kastner and Strongsville. If there's a second.
Second.
Thank you, both Ms. Chappelle, Mr. Wondolowski. And any other question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. And on to the authorization to pay 295 voting location managers at $200, and a total amount of $59,000, 320 voting location deputies at $200 per person, for a total of $64,000, 3,178 precinct election officials at $172.10, for a grand total of $546,933 $80. 295 sanitation officials at $200 a person for $59,000. 150 election substitute officials at $100, total of $15,000 for November 2nd election. So that's the cost of our personnel. If there's a second. Second. Thank you. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I will move to authorize the process payment in the amount not to exceed $29,250 for 101 private voting locations to be used at the November 2nd, 2021 general election. If there's a second. Second. Thank you. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify.
Aye.
I'll move to approve the final authorization for the allocation of voting booths for the November 2nd, 2021 general election. Those allocation quantities are based on social distancing and room size per polling location. A total of 4,613 voting booths will be allocated, plus 836 DS200 precinct scanners, 295 88 AutoMark voting units, and 1,131 electronic poll books. If there is a second. Second. Thank you. Any question or comment? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And we'll move to approve the purchase award. Move for the approval of a purchase to be awarded and recommended to purchase to Marketing Communication Resources, MRC, in the amount of $38,146.05 to print and deliver voter assistant table guides, alphabetic backup paper poll books, poll location, voter lists, precinct voter lists, and associated programming charges for the November 2nd, 2021 general election. If there's a second. Second. These are the hard book copies, Ms. Susi, is that correct?
Yes.
And why don't you just, this was the only bidder we had, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We bid this out in the past, and NCR has been the only bidder, but we tried again for the new system, and we were still only the one bidder.
And that was a competitive price consistent with past expenses? Thank you.
I just a quick question. I thought I saw that you reached out to two folks that indicated they couldn't give a competitive bid. Did they say why? Is it staffing? Did they indicate anything beyond it? They couldn't be competitive, or?
They just couldn't be competitive. NCR's pricing has been consistent for the past 5 years. They've been pretty good.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Susi. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Now move to approve the vouchers we have set forth here. Ms. Susi's here to answer any questions. There's a second. Second. Any questions on the vouchers? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, Ms. Susi. We'll tee up now. We have the next item is a challenge to right to vote by Ryan Routh against Mr. Mordecai Rennert. We have parties here, thank you. I'm going to have Miss Betty Edwards tee it up for us from the registration department. Then I'm going to acknowledge the presence of, I think, both the parties, kind of give you a summary of how we're going to proceed. And then, well, I'll start that now. Miss Edwards is with staff, so she's going to kind of tee it up for the staff. I can assure you all 4 board members have read the letter written on behalf of Mr. Roth by his attorney, setting forth the basis for the allegations. I think Mr. Routh is here, is that correct?
I am, if it pleases the board, my attorney was delayed and said he's going to be here at 9:45. I don't know if there's any way we can move this after new business. Or, you know, if
I would object.
Okay, okay, thank you, You're Mr. Mordecai Renner?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right,
we have-
coming in hot,
we can-
all right. That's our, Mr. Roth, we will accommodate you, okay? I appreciate your objections can be overruled, Mr.
If I can opine on my objection, my rights are being violated. I've already interacted with one enough.
Mr. Renner, I understand. I understand. You're going to get your opportunity to be heard. That's what we're here for. It's a due process. I understand your objection. I'm going to overrule it. Okay, with all due respect. Why don't we'll wait for your attorney, Ms. Edwards? Thank you for coming up, but we're going to put this on hold for a minute. We'll certainly accommodate you. Understand you may be running late. We do have other business we can get to, and that would be an update on the November 2nd, 2021 general election. Mr. Gallagher is here, our deputy director. Mr. Perlotti is visiting us remotely today. He's feeling a bit underneath the weather. So, Mr. Perlotti, if you're up to it, you want to give us an update? Or Mr. Gallagher?
Yeah.
Okay. No, we'll have Mr. Gallagher do it, okay, Tony?
Yep.
Did you want to start with something else and then do the election update, or should I just go ahead?
Well, go for it, Tone.
So staff is preparing for the November 2nd general election. Early in-person voting is currently, they've processed 1,200 voters. It's a little less than we had expected. Voting hours this week will remain at 8 to 5, and then next week they'll be expanded on weekdays and weekend as well. Vote by mail, currently we've received about 67,500 applications. We are on pace for the 80,000 that we had expected. Application processing is on time and current on a daily basis. Poll worker recruitment, we're set to hire 3,800 election officials. So far we've hired over 3,100, or about 82% of the goal. We are also working with both parties to notify them of the municipalities that we're currently lagging behind on, to help get some of their support in filling those positions. As far as polling locations, new polling locations, community outreach has notified the cities that are affected, the parties, the candidates, and elected officials. And we'll be putting out a press release about 4 or 5 days beforehand to notify voters at that time. Plus, we have already mailed out the voter information guides. And then election support is on track. And in fact, today they're going to start delivering out to the 295 polling locations. So that's pretty much where we're at with things.
Any questions for Mr. Gallagher? Anything you want to add, Tony, Pilates?
Not to that, but I do want to hit on Maple Heights when that's appropriate.
Any other questions for Mr. Gallagher about the election? Well, hopefully we'll have weather like today for the election on November 2nd. All right then. And I think we're still at a 30% turnout anticipated? Was that the number?
Yes.
We heard?
Yes.
Okay. So we shouldn't be overloaded at the polls with lines or issues such as that.
Right.
So
It won't be a repeat of last night.
All right, terrific. Yes, Director Pilati, you want to update us on the Maple Heights recall petitions?
Yeah. So the residents in Maple Heights in District 6 or Ward 6 submitted in petitions to recall the sitting council person, council member Trojansky. Those petitions did come in to our office last week on Tuesday. We processed those. They needed 116 valid signatures, and we got 117 valid signatures on that petition. And then as part of the process, then what we do is we certify those numbers back to the clerk of the city council for consideration by council. What was a little bit different in this process is that when we did get the petitions, there was one part petition in which the circulator statement indicated there were 24 signatures, and actually on the petition there were 25, which a strict following of the election official manual would say that that part petition would be deemed invalid and not able to be counted. However, we received advisory 2021-05 from the Secretary of State's office recently, which this matter was taken up to the Ohio Supreme Court with Trumbull County Board of Elections, and the Ohio Supreme Court came back and said something like that. BART being fraudulent is a minor mathematical mistake, and therefore the part petition should be included. And so staff reviewing that part petition, there were nothing that was out of the ordinary, such as strike throughs on a circulator number or initials of someone appearing throughout the document that would cause us to pause and want to look into things further. So then we consulted with Assistant Prosecutor Musson on this matter, and I had a conversation with the Secretary of State's legal counsel on wanting to know what is the board's responsibility as far as strict compliance with the election official manual, which is a permanent directive, and this advisory that was issued. That guidance I received was that the Ohio Supreme Court ruling supersedes what's in that directive. And in fact, Secretary of State's office will be modifying the election official manual. However, they were not planning on doing that until after this November election cycle. And that process does require them the Secretary of State to post for a couple week period for comment and all those things. But like anything with Cuyahoga County, we have to push the limits. So we had this come up prior to them having that opportunity to do that. That being said, with the guidance from the Secretary of State's office, as well as consulting with our prosecutor's office, bipartisan team seeing that there was no attempt of any kind of fraudulent activity, we went ahead and we considered that part petition to be valid. And with that, that's how we got to meeting the minimum number of signatures. So the city, and we put a notation on our certification document back to the city indicating that this was in fact in accordance with the Ferrara case with the Ohio Supreme Court and the advisory. So with that, what happens now is that the clerk took those numbers, served the impacted council member with notice of this, and allows for 5 days for that person to resign. If the person does not resign within that 5 days, then the city council will take action and set an election date. City council does have a meeting this Wednesday, October 20th, in which they will take up this matter. The service of the notice has been given. As of yet, there's been no resignation. At Wednesday's meeting, the council will set a date for the election, and per their charter, they have to do that within 30 to 40 days. So there's not a lot of turnaround. Basically, what's going to probably happen is that on Tuesday, November 23rd, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, that's when we'll have this election. That will be about the 39th or the 40th day within the charter. If that in fact is the date, then unlike some of the other recalls that we've had in our county, the previous recalls like in Richmond Heights and East Cleveland, the only thing that happens on the ballot is the question is, should the person be recalled pursuant to the Maple Heights Charter? Not only does it ask that question, but it also has us have candidate names appear on the ballot. So once the election is set, then 25 days before the election will be the filing deadline for candidates who want to appear on the ballot to finish out the remainder of the term of this council seat. The sitting council person is not eligible to put their name forward. So with all this, basically, it looks like, and we'll know more on Wednesday, or when we walk into the office on Thursday, potentially a November 23rd election with a October 29th filing deadline. And what that means then for us is that we're going to have to come together and schedule another board meeting to certify candidates to the ballot. And most likely we would want that to happen on Monday, November 1st, the day before the November board meeting, for us to certify those candidates. If all that happens, then what will happen is that Brian Cleary will create the ballot starting pretty much the day after the November 2nd election. And it'll take him for about a week to get it created, proofed, and have the voting equipment tested in order to release the ballot. And then we'll go ahead and we'll do that. So that is what's going on with the city of Maple Heights, because 6 elections isn't enough in this year. So we're going to have lucky number 7.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Pilati? Just to thank you for the update. I think we have 2 precincts we have to cover there, Director. Is that correct?
It's correct. It's just a 2 precinct election. And we will, because of the size, we'll do a lot of it internally as far as delivering equipment, staffing the polls with our permanent and long-term seasonal temporary staff to make that happen.
Also, that date of 11/23, is that something they worked with us on? Is that, I mean, you said?
Yes. So they communicated with us, and in the spirit of trying to keep elections on Tuesdays, there are 2 Tuesdays that would fall within that 30 to 40 day window, Tuesday the 16th and Tuesday the 23rd. As far as we are concerned, the 23rd works better for us. It allows us to get through the November 2nd election day. And while we will obviously still be focusing on that for certification, then we can kind of start to work on this. And it does not then allow for any overlap in early in-person voting for November and 2nd in this election and for absentee, as well as it actually gives candidates a fair shot to try to submit petitions, because if they set with the date being set at their October 20th meeting, that filing deadline could almost be just a few days away. And that's not fair to the citizens of Maple Heights who would be interested in having their name appear on the ballot.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Berlotti? Oh, since we have the board members here, is November 1st a good date for it?
I won't be here.
Yeah, and I have a problem with that date too, unfortunately. How about you two with it?
I just been doing, it's next Monday, right?
Right. I have to be in federal court though. If it's by Zoom, I could probably meet here because it'll be a quick meeting, correct? We're just certifying candidates. We can't, that's correct. No, my federal appearance, if it was by Zoom.
Oh.
I could. So do we meet, what, on the 29th? Do we have to meet on the 1st, or is there any other day?
Filing deadline?
It would just,
Yes.
It would have to be after the filing deadline, and we would have to process it. We could probably do it if people were available on election day. We could get in for a quick meeting.
Well, we just need 3 of us.
Yeah.
Ms. Chappelle's out of town that week, so, and we do need to certify, I mean, as soon as possible at the filing deadline, correct?
That is correct. So we can go ahead and officially create the ballot.
All right, that day, I'm in trial.
On the 2nd?
Yeah, I mean,
Is
it would have
the
to
3rd
be.
too late, or does that not?
I'm in trial on 3rd too.
Oh,
that's
okay.
why I'm in trial all week.
The-
We could meet on the weekend.
What
I mean,
about
who
the
wants to do
afternoon
that?
of the 1st? I mean, are you?
You know what, I tell you what, it would just be us 2. Let's plan on the 1st.
like,
Let me find out
Okay,
if I have to be in Akron or I can do this by Zoom. Sure, 9:30, let's do 9 o'clock.
oh, you want to do
Okay.
morning? Okay.
Morning,
I
right
could do it, I could, as long as I know I'll make it work. I'll
Okay.
move stuff
So
around.
let me find out if I'm gonna do this by Zoom
Okay.
or in person. If it's by Zoom, then I know I can get down here for a
Okay.
brief meeting, either in the morning or afternoon. Okay?
Perfect.
But- and
I'll
send
make
you
it
one.
work.
All right, we'll have 3 of us here then. All right, great. Thank you. Any other questions about the update? Any other updates to Deputy Director Gallagher?
No, that's it.
Any public comment, Mr. Johnny?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Then the only matter of business we have left, and I think Attorney Vespar's here, is this matter of the protesting and challenging, or actually the protest challenging the voters registration. We have Miss Betty Edwards, who is our manager for the registration department. I see Mr. Vespar's here on behalf of his client, Ryan Routh. and Mr. Mordecai Renner is here too. So all the parties are here. Just a few ground rules. I can assure you all four board members have read Mr. Vaspari's allegation setting forth the basis for the challenge. We have received an opinion from our attorney, Assistant County Prosecutor Musson, concerning these matters. We're going to hear from it, and the burden of proof is clear and convincing. That's not in debate. Clear and convincing evidence to support the challenges. We're going to hear from Mr. Vaspari and or his client in that regard. And then we're going to hear from you, Mr. Renner, also in that regard. And then we'll pepper you with questions undoubtedly. You'll both be put under oath to answer those questions. And then at some point, we'll be taking a vote in this matter, okay? So that's how we'll go. We're going to first hear from Ms. Edwards, and then we'll hear from Mr. Roth. Ms. Edwards?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Betty Edwards, Manager, Registration Department. I'd like to begin with a brief summary statement concerning the challenger, Mr. Ryan Roth, who resides in Cleveland Heights, Ohio. He is challenging Mr. Mordecai, I'm sorry, sir. I'm sorry?
Former.
Okay. Renner,
Yes, ma'am.
who resides in University Heights. Challenge of the right to vote and correction of registration list, Secretary of State Form 257, dated September 28, 2021, was received from elector Ryan Roth. Mr. Roth stated that Mr. Renner, quote, on July 1st, 2021, testified under oath in a deposition taken pursuant to the laws of the state of New York that he resides only temporarily in the Cleveland area and that his residence is located in Rochester, Monroe County, New York. Staff researched both registrations, and as a result of the challenge filed received from Mr. Roth, we conducted that investigation, and the following information is provided. In regards to Mr. Renner, he originally registered to vote in Cuyahoga County on November 17th of 2000. The residential address listed for Mr. Renner was on Severn Road in Cleveland Heights. Mr. Renner did not vote in any elections from 2001 through 2007. On September 28, 2007, after no voter activity, Mr. Renner was sent a National Voter Registration Act confirmation notice for lack of voter activity. Mr. Renner's registration was canceled on September 29, 2011, respective to the 2007 NVRA notice. Further, Mr. Renner again registered to vote in Cuyahoga County on September 8, 2020. The residential address listed for him was in University Heights, Ohio. Mr. Renner successfully voted by mail in the November 3rd, 2020 general election and in the August 3rd, 2021 special election. Additional information. It should be noted that Mr. Renner started circulating a petition for the Cleveland Heights University Heights Consolidated School District on July 16, 2021. Mr. Renner filed a petition with the Cuyahoga County Board of Election on August 3rd, 2021. Mr. Renner received the required number of ballot signatures, 150, to be placed on the November 3rd, 2021 general election ballot. Mr. Roth initially tried to file a candidacy protest against Mr. Renner. However, his protest was not filed, with the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections prior to the August 20th deadline.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Any questions for Ms. Edwards? Okay, Mr. Vaspari, you and your client can, yes, you can come up where Ms. Edwards is to put forth your claim, and we'll go from there. And then Mr. Renner will have an opportunity to speak to the board. Yes, Mr. Vaspari.
Thank you, Mr. Carlotti, and members of the board. The facts in this case are very few, and the operative fact, which is most interesting, of course, is that Mr. Renner submitted in his initial pooling of petitions, I think it was on the 15th of July. The ordinary statement that affirms to this board under penalty of election law that he was in fact a resident in the district in which he was seeking election, that is to say, the Cleveland Heights University Heights Consolidated School District. And that would be unremarkable, except that 14 days earlier, he was deposed in connection with a suit against him by a private school in Monroe County, New York, alleging that he owed quite a bit of money in back tuition. And in the course of that deposition, he was asked about his residence. And obviously,
Actually, excuse me.
Yeah, Mr. Renner, no, this is, you're going to get a chance to be heard. This isn't a court of law. The rules of evidence are very broad. So you can address any statements Mr. Vespar and Mr. Roth make when you get a turn, okay? No, you can't. You can have a seat, please. All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr.
obviously,
Vespar.
the board, thank you, sir. The board's decision today is governed by the rules set forth in the revised code for the determination of residency, as they have been interpreted by the Supreme Court. And residency and domicile, well, elastic terms that are not always overlapping in the election context tend to overlap more than most. Section 350302 really provides the rules of decision here. The testimony in the deposition in Rochester is very brief, but the language is very important. And I suggest to you today that the testimony given in that case was without regard to this proceeding, without contemplating this proceeding, and as a result, perhaps a bit less structured and more candid than one might expect, less guarded than one might expect in this proceeding. The board has before the deposition transcript, and on page 6, the following questions are asked. What is your current residence address? Not your residence address. 54 St. Regis Drive North, Rochester, New York, is my home in Rochester. And then here's the interesting bit that was volunteered, not asked. I live in Cleveland right now, currently, due to the COVID situation. Right now, currently is an interesting choice of words because it suggests a temporary or non-permanent status. The sort of status that when you look at 350302B, a person shall not be considered to have lost a person's residence who leaves his home state and goes into another state or county for temporary purposes only. That's the going out version. And the parallel coming in version in C, a person shall not be considered to have gained a residence in any county of this state into which the person comes for temporary purposes only, without the intention of making such county the permanent place of abode. It's not been asked, it was not germane necessarily to all the testimony that was going on in Monroe County, but nonetheless, Mr. Renner volunteered, I live in Cleveland now currently due to the COVID situation, which is just a temporary or a permanent residence. So I rented that residence out. He's now still answering, but he's referring to the Regis Drive residence in Rochester. But my residence is still in New York State. Again, he volunteers this. It's not something he's been asked. It's not a point of contention. He volunteers that even though he's rented the residence in Monroe County, he considers New York to be his residence. Remember, this is July 1st, 14 days before he pulls petitions in Ohio. Is it interlocutory? I missed this, but you said that you're currently residing in Cleveland. Is that correct? Answer, yes, I am. Question, but you are maintaining your St. Regis Drive address as your residence. Is that correct? Yes, sir, it is. He's maintaining his residence in New York under oath on the 1st of July, notwithstanding the fact that he's currently living in Cleveland. And that's all. It speaks to the temporary nature of coming into Cleveland. It suggests that in his heart, in his mind, or perhaps most importantly for purposes of subsection C, in his intentions, the point is to go back to New York at some point.
So thank you, Mr. Vespar. I know some board members have some questions.
I have just one more thing to direct to the board. The obvious case here, I'm sure that it's been cited by the assistant prosecutor in your papers, is State Ex Rel. Husted versus Bruner, which talks about the intention to remove to someplace after a fairly significant period of temporary residence. And that then State Representative Husted, before he was Secretary of State, had an apartment in Franklin County to do his business in the state legislature. His residence was challenged. They said he wasn't really an elector and therefore couldn't stand or couldn't represent Montgomery County anymore. And the Supreme Court ultimately held that even though he had a long-term residence in Columbus where he kept a whole housekeeping and intended to go back to Montgomery County at some point, despite the fact that he was living there on a substantial basis, doing his business there, working there, had an apartment, had set up housekeeping, his ultimate intention was to go back to Dayton. And he was, in that regard, an elector in Montgomery County. Same logic applies here. It may be a long-term intention, but it's very clear that this deposition testimony, brief as it is, indicates maintaining one's residence in New York and being in Cleveland for however long temporarily. Like Mr. Brooks, that the intention to return is dispositive. And that's why Mr. Renner should not be allowed to vote in the election.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Visvari. Mr. Sticken, did you have a question?
Right, so currently residing, he's saying he's currently residing in Cleveland. I feel like you're saying this means temporary. I don't see currently as temporary. You know, he doesn't say this is a temporary, he says, I am currently residing in Cleveland. It also indicates he rented out this residence in New York, so he's not living in this residence in New York.
The question isn't whether he's living there. The question is.
Well, no, I'm asking you, so, because you brought us this transcript, so I'm looking at this and at the plain language, and I guess, I don't see where it says temporary, it says currently residing in Cleveland, and it does say he rented this other residence out.
Right, but I maintain my place of residence, and that's the tension. And that implies.
But this is for the purposes of a legal proceeding, correct? This isn't,
This is for the purposes, ma'am, of the truth.
right?
He was asked where he considered his.
Well, no, I asked, his transcript was from a case in New York, correct?
I'm sorry?
His transcript was from a case in New York, correct?
Correct.
Okay, would this be an issue perhaps for the New York court as well?
Well, it could,
I
it
mean,
could. I mean,
okay.
it could, if somebody in that case thought that it was germane for purposes of his residency in the dispute in New York, it could be,
For
or it
purposes
could not
of,
matter at all.
for purposes of a jurisdiction in a case there, as opposed to whether or not you're currently living in a house in Cleveland and voting where you live.
No, that's not a decision for the New York court, that's a decision squarely.
No, I'm just saying that's a decision for us.
Yes,
He
that's-
lives here and
that's-
votes here, and it does appear he does live here and is registered to vote here. So I guess that's enough for my
So,
question.
right, so Mr. Visvari, this is your evidence, which is the transcript from the court proceeding, correct?
Correct, that's the only evidence we have.
Right, okay, very good. Having any other questions for Mr. Gasparri?
No.
Okay, thank you. Then Mr. Mordecai Renner, you can take the stance here. I'm going to swear you in. Mr. Renner, Stephen, would you do that, please? Our court reporter will swear you in, sir.
Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do affirm.
Okay, Mr. Gasparri, you have read, I'm sure, Mr. Renner, you've read Mr. Gasparri's letter. You've heard his testimony in front of this board, and it's your turn to be heard, sir.
I'll make this very easy for everybody. If I can give this to somebody, if you pass it on, I'm sorry, sir. This is disrespectful. There's my evidence.
So you're circulating what, a driver's license?
Yes.
We need to make a copy of that, maybe.
We should.
Yeah.
Okay. You can,
In addition to that, you can take my business card.
well, wait, let's see.
Do you want to see it?
Yeah, I mean, you
Sure.
can make copies
We'll make it.
later. I don't want to delay the meeting because of.
Okay. Okay, this looks like his business card.
Now, this has a University Heights address on it.
Correct.
This has a South Euclid address on it.
Yeah, that's my business card.
Okay.
I'm just made, I'll get the purpose of.
Okay, if someone could make copies while we're doing this, Mr. Johnny? And copies, I would need 1, 2, 6 copies or 7 copies.
May I ask a couple of questions so that I understand a little bit more? I'm not an attorney, just a simple guy. So everything that's set up here by attorneys and plaintiffs in a matter, and by myself in this particular case, would be prosecutable under perjury?
We're not at that step. Let's get to
Well,
the.
I am, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
There was assertions made here that were incorrect from the get-go and was known. In addition to that, there's some ethical violations that the attorneys in this room would know about. But you can't just assert evidence not a fact, and you can't assume. So let's take the first one. The words from the attorney this morning were that there's a case suing me for tuition. That's actually correct. Let me clarify this. And I apologize for my.
Mr. Renner, let me interrupt you, okay? Sir, we're fact finders here today.
I'm about
The issue, listen to me, the issue here is someone's challenged your ability to vote on November 2nd. That's it, all right?
I understand.
And they're challenging it based on the fact that they're claiming that the protester, that you don't reside here, and because you don't reside, you can't vote here in Cuyahoga County. That's their argument. So that's the only reason we're here, all right? For that thing. They're using to support their allegation, apparently your testimony under oath in a case in New York, okay? We're not interested in the underlying facts, the merits to that case, okay? We're interested in finding out whether you reside here or you reside in New York. In support of your position, you have just submitted, to your benefit, a driver's license showing an address here and a business card, okay? So we want to hear evidence in that regard, all right? All right, so why don't you go along that line?
Sure. And again, with due respect, and I'm not here in agitation against anybody at this table. Please understand that I am agitated.
I understand.
Please understand the reason that I'm agitated.
Sure.
The reason that I'm agitated is because there's someone who's coming up against me who forgot to disclose to this board that they sit on a appointed board by the exact opponents in the election that we're dealing with.
That's what we deal with all the time. It's always an opponent versus an opponent.
I'm not running for Senate.
Okay, I know.
I'm running for school board.
But that's all, we get that. This is how these things start, is council appointments go against council appointments, or candidates go against candidates. So let's address the issue. I'm trying to help you, help prosecute your case, okay?
Okay,
So provide us evidence that shows you reside in Cuyahoga County.
Sure.
Please, Mr. Whitehouse.
The issuance date of this driver's license is August of 2020.
yes, sir, correct.
You just got this license.
I got this license within a month of me moving here, 2021.
Carry on.
So I moved here. I did move here temporarily. A couple of the points that I picked up were that my comments suggest a temporary status. So let me clarify that. I'm not here temporarily. In addition to that, it also explained that he talked about my intention. So I'm right here and I can tell you my intention. My intention was to come back home. The reason that I was registered in 2000 was because I lived there. And I got married and moved out, and I registered to vote in Pennsylvania and then New York, and now I'm back here. So I registered to vote again. And I have all intents not to move again, outside of if I choose to build myself a home here versus to buy an existing home. My house in Rochester, or it's actually in the town of Wright, is almost thoroughly through its mortgage. And I found some good tenants. So there was no financial reason for me to dispel a nice house that I could still keep and pay through the mortgage, and then continue to live here. My office is here. My parents live here. I have 2 siblings that live here. My home, my childhood home is here. My friends here. I'm walking around door knocking and I'm meeting people again that I haven't seen in 20 years or so that I grew up with, that I went to school with. And to have some people that never met me, never knew me, try to take away my right to vote. There are many people in this room right here that have been disenfranchised for many years. And you hear from everybody in every political and apolitical office saying, don't do that. And we're literally sitting in your office here, if I may call this an office, saying, yeah, let's take away his right to vote. I find that important. I take it very personally, which is the source of my action.
So let me interrupt you, Mr. Renner. Okay, it's not in dispute. You don't dispute the language in this transcript?
No,
Did you
but I
see
did
that?
understand how it could be parsed apart, and forgive me
So,
for not
let
going
me-
to law school.
Okay, no, but this is the essence of the case. I
Sure.
mean, you're under oath, correct?
Yes, sir.
You had to tell the truth in this deposition,
Always
correct?
did.
Right? So it's asked, what is your current residence? And you state 54 Regis Drive, North Rochester. Okay,
Sure.
Okay, was that your current residence at the time?
Let me explain. I was
Okay.
trying to get to that.
Sure, why don't you get to that?
Sure. So the actual genesis of the case is the fact that my son's arm was fractured by a school teacher. And in lieu of going out through the, and under the advice of many counsels and prosecutors, instead of going and making a whole big hullabaloo on it, I asked them to retract a letter that they had written to a community disputing the validity of the fracture of the arm. They were literally questioning whether or not his arm was broken. In the course of this, they refused to do so, and we were ostracized, or our children were ostracized by many members of the community. And I understand that. So in order to rectify that, I asked them to please retract, and they refused. Because they refused, I didn't file a case against them for breaking his arm. I filed a case against them for defamation because they lied. As a retribution, they came back at me and said, oh, you owe tuition. That's where the tuition part of it. I've disputed that in the same deposition that I do not owe them those monies. And as anybody knows, you can say anything you want in a lawsuit, but the facts are that it has nothing to do with all of that. What were they doing? They were trying to search for assets.
Mr. Leonard, what's that got to do with your address?
They were
okay?
trying to search for assets, so I gave them the asset that I have in Brighton. That was as simple as that. I have a house there. If they were trying to sue me for money and they're trying to get it, my lawyer explained to me they want to know what I own. So I told them what I own. I own a home there. I rent it out to people. And one day when, all this is over, I'm still going to own the home and I'm still going to rent it out. And I'm still going to maintain living in Cleveland because this is where we are. I have my children in high school. I plan on, just like my first child graduated from Cleveland schools, I plan on to do the last 4.
But you go on to say, but my residence is still in New York State.
So I did the intention of trying to figure out whether or not I was trying to make a legal claim of, there's no legal claim here. If that's something that doesn't make sense to somebody, let me clarify that. I live in Cleveland. My car is registered in Cleveland. I pay my bills in Cleveland. My tax returns are in Cleveland. That's where I am now. I received your letters at my house. I don't really know how to prove something other than here. This is where I am. I really don't know what anybody
Okay,
wants.
Mr. Leonard, thank you. Another
I just have a
question.
question. I just thought I heard you under oath say that you moved here temporarily.
I
Could you
did
just-
not.
Could you just read back his initial statement? I just don't want to make sure I heard that right or did not hear that right. I thought I heard you say you moved here temporarily. Can we just see if, yeah.
I repeated what they said, but I didn't say.
I just want to get a clarification so I don't misunderstand your testimony under oath. And while you're looking for that, I know you need to take down the testimony, but are you able to find it?
I'm not saying that.
I think the only time you temporarily
I am
when was
100% sure I heard I moved here temporarily, but maybe not.
You may have heard that in the context of me saying they are asserting that I moved here temporarily.
Okay.
I did not move here temporarily.
So could you then, okay, that's okay. If you can't find that. Somewhere in there, he's indicating he said it, but in a different context. So somewhere those words do appear. Here's the question then. Are you ready? Okay, here's the question then for me. What does it mean then when you say, but my residence is still in New York State? What did you,
My
What
home
did you-
is still, meaning my house, the physical bricks and mortar of the house that they are trying to figure out about my assets.
okay, not about the assets, but then why do you,
That's the
why?
intention. That's their
Wait,
intention.
she's gonna ask a question, you
Okay.
get to answer, and we'll go back and forth.
Okay, so then why do you say I live in Cleveland right now currently due to the COVID situation? Because to me, that suggests that you're only here because, like many people that left their permanent residence, they moved somewhere else to be dealing with, a safe place where they could be away from lots of people during the pandemic, but their intention was to go back to their permanent residence.
So
So what does that mean that you came here because of
let me
COVID?
clarify it. Very, very simple. My kids are registered, have been registered in the school here. The plan for their registration in the schools here was already in the December prior to our move. The only reason we come earlier was because the schools did not want to take them mid-year, understandably. My intention was to move here and to stay here. That's it. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less.
Why didn't you say that in your testimony here?
I guess if I worded something incorrectly, There was no intention, there was no malintention. I didn't even have an intention to run the school board, frankly speaking. That was something that came up because I was in the middle of an IEP and the school board administration hasn't put enough people in the special ed department, so I couldn't get help. I'm still in the middle of it. It's still irritating.
Mr. Renner, when did you move to 4365 Churchill Boulevard?
I believe the exact, let me try not to get very specific, but it was the end of June, beginning of July is when we moved most of our belongings, and then kind of facilitated the move through July.
Where did you move from?
54 Sandwich Drive.
And do you own that property? Or are you renting it?
Which one?
4365.
Currently, I'm renting it.
You rent it.
Yes, sir.
And your business, how long has it been located, or Severn Group? How long has that been?
2018.
Okay, are you incorporated here in Ohio? or-
Yes, sir.
And did you incorporate back then?
It's been incorporated, yes, sir.
About 2019,
18,
2008.
I believe so.
And so you've been at the Warrensville Center Road address in 2008?
We actually moved recently, so the cars don't reflect the address, but we moved to the other side of, to Cedar and Green, which is still in South.
Okay, but your business has been in Northeast Ohio, Cuyahoga County.
Yes, sir.
And your children are enrolled in what school? I don't need the specifics, but what
Sure.
school?
The schools are located in Cleveland Heights.
Cleveland Heights.
Yes, sir.
And,
I have a good question.
please,
You're married?
No,
Oh, okay. Do you have any family members of voting age that live with you other than your children?
other than my children?
Yeah. All right.
No, I've,
And your children reside with you in your home in Cleveland Heights?
yes, ma'am, except for the oldest who's in, foreign country for school, post high school.
Okay, all right.
But I have a question. But for the dispute with the school, would you have moved your children back to go back to that school back in New York?
We had the answer is they're a K through 8, so after 8th grade, we would have had to find substantial high schools for my children. So this was at the last year of my twins, so that would have left maybe another year that I could have left my kids in that school in any case. But we actually had to leave that school. Part of my claim to them in the lawsuit is damages for causing me to have to move, where we actually located and relocated the children and put them in the school in New Jersey while we figured things out. I'm really not going to get into that. That goes into a matrimonial issue, which has been now settled by the appellate division.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the intention to come here and
Sure.
the time that you were here. And my question was simply, but for the pandemic, or perhaps but for the dispute with the school,
Sure.
that you would have returned
So I
quickly.
appreciate that question. The answer is, and actually dividing the two is, I've been raising my children alone for a long time, and they're getting older. And family is a necessity, especially when I have multiple teenage girls. And I have parents that live here, and I have a sister that lives here. And I'll be honest with you, the fact that you can have somebody in the community question your validity is disgraceful. The first question that I've had that actually asked for that, which ties in why we're here, I can answer all that. But realize that I'm being videotaped and it will be forever, that anybody can pull this tape on. So there's a point where I appreciate if the question is stopped, and just understand.
Well,
And I understand what you're saying, but
your deposition testimony,
my deposition
very
is
much
none of
like the same-
anybody's business.
excuse me, Mr. Renner, she's asking a question. This is what happens when you run for public office, okay? Your life becomes public, all right? In matters such as this, but I'm just asking you if you answer a question. I don't think anybody intends to get in personal matters relating to you, okay? At all. No one does.
We're just
We won't ask you those questions.
Sure,
Okay.
no problem.
So,
We're just
Ms.
trying to understand
Chappelle,
the
did
testimony.
you have a question? Did you have a question?
no, I don't have any
All
more
right,
questions.
let me just ask you this, Mr. Renner. You were, at the time this deposition took place, that was in July, correct?
Correct.
Where were you living at that time?
In my home in Churchill, on Churchill Boulevard, University Heights. I drove up there.
Okay, so what time when did you move into Churchill? You said that was in June?
We began our movement at the end of June and July of 2020.
So, and you moved to Churchill from
Correct.
Regis Drive.
Correct.
So in June, you moved from Regis Drive to Churchill.
Correct.
You come from Churchill back to New York because of this litigation.
No, I physically went there.
Right, physically
Oh.
went there they asked you where you live. You said Regis, right? And I thought, I heard you correctly, so I told them Regis because I thought they were looking for my assets, right?
That's what I was told.
Okay.
Let
I just.
me clarify, that's
Okay.
actually what I was told that they were looking for, and that, again, that's, my attorney explained to me, this is what they're going to do, this is what they're trying to do.
So how long were you at Regis Drive before you moved to University
I
Heights?
bought it on August 14, 2015.
So you lived there from 15 to 2021 in June?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Mr. Wandelowski?
Mr. Chairman, in the last 6 years, we've heard numerous residency cases. I don't remember one that we've ever actually accepted. In this particular case, though, we haven't accepted them primarily not because they weren't legitimate, but because nobody ever brought enough proof. Nobody ever really did the footwork to prove that there was an intent to return or there was no intent to return. In this particular case, your own words are your biggest enemy here, and in this testimony. And I hate to do this, but I have to do it in good conscience. I'm going to make a motion to accept the challenge. To uphold the protest. To uphold the protest. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna second that motion, and I'll just tell you, I am deeply disturbed. I mean, in part because, I don't ever want to disenfranchise anybody. And I think in the past, to my colleagues' comments, we've had lots of these cases, and it always becomes very difficult to discern what is someone's intent to return. Lots of people have secondary homes. And they have furniture and they do stuff in there, but their place and their intent to return is maybe the homestead or the place where they declare is their permanent residence. I view your testimony in total context as you're indicating that this Cleveland place is temporary and that you do intend to return to your permanent homestead. That's just my interpretation of this testimony. We have never had testimony that a person has given under oath that suggests that they permanently intend to reside, or that their residence here in the voting district that they're claiming is temporary. And I just, given how we've decided the cases in the past, given the facts today, given the law, a person shall not be considered to have gained a residence in any county of the state into which the person comes for temporary purposes only, without the intention of making such county the permanent place of abode. It just seems to me that the testimony you gave under oath is really concerning and suggests to me, despite what you're saying today, 14 days before you circulated that, you were declaring your permanent residence was in New York. That's how I read it. I don't know if somebody else reads it differently, but that's how I read it.
Well, here's the
If I could respond to that, I, with full due respect, I agree what you're saying about the transcript in terms of it raising questions. My issue is we keep interpreting the transcript, and that's really all we have. So for purposes of why I wouldn't support your motion, I look essentially at the case McPherson versus Trumbull, which was suggested to us, and some of the criteria listed, which is why I tried to kind of pay attention. One of the things we can look at in type of evidence for purposes of determining this claim would be a driver's license, which we did see and do have in evidence. Would also be evidence of where family members reside. We did hear testimony the children reside with him and do attend school here. Additionally, you can look at, I believe he testified he pays taxes here as well too. So those are factors we can weigh versus, and while I agree the transcript is what the transcript is, and I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, I feel like we have to take some extra steps. So for purposes of that, and I did my balancing test under McPherson, I don't support the motion.
Well, okay, thank you, Ms. Stickens. So, Ms. Chappelle, did you second Mr. Wandelowski's
I did.
motion? Did you? Okay, so we're open for discussion on that. Thank you for all your thoughtful comments. I'm not yet done hearing evidence, okay? Because it's got to be clear and convincing. You provided this transcript and Mr. Vespari's testimony. So in 2015, you're living in Rochester. Where were you living prior to 2015?
in Rochester.
So when did you move to, you were registered though, you saw you were registered in Cleveland. Our staff indicates you were registered in.
Mr. Hastings, it's almost not worth my while starting answering these questions. We're starting to get into, and I understand why you're asking, and please, I really do.
No, I just want to get a timeline of where you resided. So did you reside in Cleveland Heights in 2000?
Yeah.
Okay, and when did you move from Cleveland Heights to Rochester?
I didn't, I moved to,
I'm just trying,
I think you're right, public life opens you up to.
so you moved from Cleveland
Like
Heights?
this, and I'm not, nobody at this table is doing anything that I don't agree with. But every aspect of the fact that I'm standing here right now goes against the grain of the flag that's.
Okay, let's put it this, Mr. Renner. When did you leave Cleveland Heights?
I left Cleveland after I got married.
Okay.
Well, actually, right before I got married, right before I got married.
About 2000?
About 2000, yeah, a little before 2000, right before 2000.
And you moved to New York?
We ended up moving to Philadelphia.
Okay, Phil. All right, this way. And from Philly, you moved to New York?
So I had, one of my children was born with a deadly disease, and we had to find a hospital. And so we found a hospital at the University of Rochester, which is why we moved there. Okay, subsequent to matrimonial action, I changed residence, I changed the house, the physical house. I had to get another house, and all my children were living with me. I've raised my children since then in that house. Due to the schooling ending at 8th grade that were available to my children, we would have had to find, no matter no matter what we would have done, even if we left with glowing parades, we would have had to leave that area because my children didn't have adequate education at that point.
Sure. So I'm just, 2000, you leave Cleveland, you go to Philadelphia, eventually you end up in Rochester.
Yes.
You bought the house in Rochester in 2015,
Yes,
correct? And then you moved here, it's your testimony, with intent to reside here in 2000, in June of 2021. Is that correct?
yes, sir.
Okay, I'm just trying to.
Okay, can I submit one other?
If I could add, these questions, you gotta understand, there is the transcript, so these are proper questions. A challenge was raised, so you are here to defend yourself, but this isn't an argument. This is, us trying to fact find, as you can see. So go ahead.
So you moved here in June of 2021,
Yes,
and it's your testimony that this is your residence and your habitation is fixed here in Cleveland now,
yes, sir.
despite a testimony that conflicts, arguably on its face conflicts with what you said in July.
I can understand how you can read it differently, but to answer your question, yes. As a matter of fact, let me clarify a couple other things. I put in an offer to buy a residence here in that same period of time moving here. And unfortunately, that fell through due to some of the point of sale issues in the community. I currently hold a contract to be able to give myself a permanent house. I have to be very careful because I'm under contract.
Mr. Renner, I just want to ask you this question. What is your permanent residence as of today?
4365 Churchill Boulevard, University Heights, Ohio.
And is that a habitation which is fixed for you?
Yes,
And if you were to leave and come, where would your home be?
so I leave, thank you.
Right.
I leave very often for travel for work. And every time I come back home, here, every time.
So is your residence any longer in Rochester, New York?
No, but I do own a residence there.
Yeah, it's okay, you own a residence, and when did the University Heights property become your permanent residence?
So I believe, and the only reason is because it's being picked at with legalese and not by you, I understand that. And then, again, please don't take any of my responses as against.
I asked you the question, when did University Heights become your permanent residence?
Approximately, I don't know, about the end of June, I think it was June 29th, July 1st
Okay.
of 2020, and we continuously move through that month.
Mr. Wondolowski. Just,
Yes,
I know that you're claiming that we are maybe construing this,
sure,
but word for word.
sure,
So I've rented this residence out, quote,
yes.
but my residence is still in New York State, 14 days before. Okay, I mean, I don't know how else to interpret that.
Sure.
The interpretation is clear. I live in Cleveland right now because of COVID. I've never seen more damning evidence in one of these situations.
I'm not a lawyer.
Only because they're your words.
I
It's that has nothing to do with their attorney or the person that's challenging it. You're voting, it's your words.
I get it. I'm not here to debate that because I don't know how to, look, when I called the officer and they said, no, you don't need an attorney, apparently I do. And it's okay. It's okay. I don't know how to properly answer that in a legally fashion. I can tell you, sir, that if you'd like to come for dinner, if you go to that address, they don't cook good food there as much as I do. You come to my house, I cook it.
I would just say you saved your money not getting an attorney because you cannot defend your own words in this transcript.
Again, I'm not a lawyer to be able to respond, and the gentleman who sits on the late finance committee for my political opponents hired an attorney just to try to take your letters and your words and go put it up on Facebook and Nextdoor for political purposes. You really think he gives a damn if I have a house or not in Rochester? No. The point is he doesn't want me to win an election. I think it's a disgrace, and I understand.
Well, Mr. Renner, I understand. You're going to be on the ballot regardless, okay?
I
The
understand,
only
but it's my
issue
right
is,
to
right,
vote.
right, that's your right, right, that's right, correct. And that's what we're hearing today. We've got a motion to uphold the protest brought by Mr. Roth. And there's been a second to that, and now we're hearing some discussion. That's what happens here. Additional evidence was being taken for you. Are there any other evidentiary questions for Mr. Renner in this regard at this point? Let me just ask a few. You have utility bills that come to that property? Or, okay, do you pay those utility bills?
Of course.
Okay. Where do you do your banking at?
Bank of America?
Okay. In Cleveland or in New York?
They have a branch right there.
If yes, in Cleveland?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
all right, you were appointed. Your driver's license indicates a University Heights. What sort of plates do you have on your car right now?
I have an Ohio license plate.
Okay, there's a how lot your car's registered now?
And just for clarity, I have a rental vehicle in the parking lot here with Virginia plates, but it's a rental. My Ford F-150, which is actually the one that's owned by me that I just.
Mr. Renner,
Yes.
Mr. Renner, do you file income tax with the University Heights, Cleveland Heights school system?
Yes,
I just asked you a question.
my taxes are done by the accountant for Ohio. I think. it was
But
a
you
part
pay
of-
taxes here and
Yes, sir.
okay.
Pay taxes in New York as well, though, right?
I pay property taxes, because the house, you have to pay on property.
All right. I thank you. All right, this has been a very spirited engagement, and Mr. Wondolowski and Ms. Chappelle have certainly, I see their point, absolutely see their point. I see your point too. I mean, we've had, and there is an inconsistency, clear, there's no debate about it. To me, the issue is whether there's clear and convincing evidence that would support Mr. Wondolowski and Ms. Chappelle's motion. And I'm confused. Okay, I'm not convinced by clear and convincing evidence in light of your testimony, because there's an inconsistency, clearly, as Mr. Wondolowski points out. There clearly is an inconsistency. You've explained that the reason I said that is for reasons that aren't apparent in the transcript, but they're reasons you gave us. And in addition to that, and I know my colleagues, it's a very liberal interpretation about letting people get on a ballot, letting people to vote. And I'm just not convinced, while there's inconsistency between your sworn testimony in the deposition to today's testimony, I'm not convinced by clear and convincing evidence that you don't in fact have an intent to reside here permanently, and therefore you should be able to vote here. So I'm going to oppose the motion for those reasons. Okay.
I would just posit that because there's confusion and uncertainty, it's not clear, and therefore doesn't meet the standard. So that would just be my response.
Well, but the protester has a clear present.
Yeah, that's-
I know, but as we look at the evidence in total, it is not clear to me, and the testimony that's being given here is not credible to me. Yeah.
I would just add, we do have the deposition, and I share your concerns and questions, which is why I think this was a good and spirited discussion, which is why you did need to answer these questions. But I went back to that case and the memo provided, and I did look at the factors, so I weighed, just to be clear, so.
Well, okay, we have a motion here to uphold the protest and invalidate Mr. Renner's ability to vote in this election. And we've had discussion on that. If there's no more discussion, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of the motion to uphold the protest signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same side, aye.
Opposed, yeah, nay.
Aye. Okay, so we have a tied vote. I don't know if there's something that, we can, the next step would be to the Secretary of State. I think this is a matter that would go there. We'd have 14 days to provide that unless we're doing reconsideration or discussion or caucus about this.
I'm firm with my position.
Yeah, I think we might just need to order the transcript and.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so what we'll do, thank you. So it's a tie vote, as a result of that. We have 14 days to submit our position papers, to the parties that support the position to uphold the protest, those that don't, set forth our reasons. It goes to the secretary. He then, on his timetable, will make a determination how to handle this. Sometimes they kick it back, sometimes he doesn't take a position. Otherwise, he may cast a vote here in support of the motion of that. So that'll get done before the November election, so you'll have an idea whether you can vote, Mr. Renner. But right now, the protest has not passed yet, because you need a majority, so.
Does it make any difference in this committee that every word that's said here, no matter which way it was, including the letter?
Mr. Renner, just the matter's over here, okay? Is there any questions you have about the process?
Yeah, is there any restriction against somebody taking all these proceedings and turning them and disseminating the proceedings out there?
This is a
In their own opinion?
this is a
It's
public
already on
record.
YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a public record. So if you want a copy of the letters, Mr. Vespari wants a copy of these letters, he's entitled to it. He's entitled to a copy of the transcript.
So yeah, I think it appears on the Secretary of State's website, the tie vote and the decision will actually be on the Secretary of State website.
Yeah.
So,
They usually post that.
so, all right,
So to be clear, there's no determination at this point.
not yet. That's correct. That's
Yes.
correct. The motion has to pass 3-1 by a majority. It
It's a
has.
franchise, you have to go wait for Secretary of State.
We're going to wait for the secretary to decide this matter. So, any questions from my board members? Thank you, Mr. Renner. Any
Yeah,
quick-
thank the parties for coming down. It's always
Mr.
difficult.
Vespari, yes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we just request a copy of the transcript later.
That's fine. Steve, we're going to order the transcript expedited basis if you could. And then let Mr. Vespari, if you have his contact information. Get
I'll get your information.
Yeah. All right. And if we can get that as soon as possible, you can email to us, then Lisa and I'll talk, and I know
Yeah.
Joe and Dave will talk about.
Yeah.
Position. Any other questions? Any more public comment that may have come up? All right. Thank you both for your advocacy of your positions. We appreciate that and made this an interesting and thoughtful meeting. So thank you. Hearing that we'll be in recess now for the upcoming November 2nd election.
I think Director Corlatti wanted us to go into executive session to discuss.
Yeah.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Oh.
All right, to discuss ongoing litigation in that case. So I'll move to go into executive session to discuss possible litigation.
Second.
Thank you. Ms. Sticken?
Yes.
Mr. Wondolowski?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, Hastings. And that litigation involves a matter in front of the Ohio Elections Commission. Thank you. All right, we are adjourned. We're not adjourned yet, but all we're going to do is executive session, come out and go into recess.
No action.
What's that?
They don't stick around and find no action. They're taking after.
You're gonna go into recess.
Yeah, after I see the transcript, maybe have a different view, you know.